Welcome to the Organizational Maneuverability Radio Show, Defying Gravity so your team can soar at altitude, with host Marshall Goldsmith, Executive Coach Randy Swaim.
Perfect, Randy. All right, thanks for being here, Randy. Today I would like to ask you a couple of questions.
Be honored to, my friend.
So, Randy, let's dive straight into it. You are an expert in so many fields, and one of them being an expert in leadership behavior.
Okay.
What inner need or motivation do you believe is driving self-focused leadership behavior?
Yeah, and when you're talking about your leadership, a lot of people kind of misinterpret the aspect of true leadership, because leadership, true leadership, does not just come from you and bragging on yourself, kind of thing. A true leader is how you're connecting with your people in such a way that they are growing and becoming. And it's not just you telling them what to do necessarily, but it's, are you connecting with them in such a way that their overall operational awareness and intelligence is growing and becoming, and their whole aspect of making good decisions is coming to not just because you tell them, but because they're seeing more and more of the aspect of it and the factors that are involved. And as a leader, that is a key aspect, that is a key difference between strict managers and leaders. And when you're leading your team, are those people really becoming different? Are they becoming better? Not just because you're telling them what to do or telling them where to go, but you're leading them in such a way. And then some of that is modeling kind of thing, but also interacting with them in such a way that they are becoming much more aware of unexpected but successful aspects about it. And they build that into their journey, into their application, and that can be huge.
So, Randy, picking up on that point, would you you have so many examples from your life and your experiences.
Mhm.
What specific behaviors distinguish a good leader from a negative example?
Thank you. And the key on this is really big, because you've got to realize that true leadership is not about me pulling everybody. In fact, this was on a recent podcast show that I was on. I shared this, but I also shared it on a one of my um, publications on my website and everything, blogs. But the bottom line is, when you're talking about true leadership, it's not about you pulling your team into you and just saying, hey, do this, do that, do this, do that. No, that's not true leadership. That's dictatorial control freak, but it's not true leadership. True leadership is when you're bringing it all out to them, and when you're leading it in such a way that they are perhaps experiencing things a little different, or being aware of things that they weren't aware of before, not because you dictated to them, but because they grew and they became. And how you interacted with them is such a way that they become more aware of some of those unexpected factors that can come on scene. But not only that, they're getting a little bit of clarity on, what are the things that I need to kind of be aware of as I think about making my decision, and all that. And those are aspects about a true leader. True managers, it's all about pulling everybody into them and just, you just shut up and do what I tell you to do, kind of thing. That's not leadership. Leadership is when you're connecting with your people in such a way that really it's all about them. You're bringing some of your stuff out to them, sometimes with key questions, sometimes with having good conversations about certain factors or whatever. And it's not just about you dictating, but you know, building them in their awareness. And so that's just a key part of that leadership that is so vital.
Randy, in one picking up on that point again, I remember that in one of our previous conversations, you said you really emphasize listening over speaking. So,
Yes.
what kind of listening are you thinking of?
Well, I'll tell you what, are you hearing what they're actually thinking about? Are you becoming aware of that? If you ask questions, are they just control questions, or are you getting a sense for where they're becoming with it, and everything? Now, when you're talking about listening, people don't totally understand this as much in a sort of an operational world, but what you have is when you talk about listening, it's not just about their words, but it's about listening to what they're actually communicating. And guess what? What they're actually communicating can be somewhat in their nonverbal communication when they're talking. And are you aware of that? When you're listening, if all you're doing is listening to rote academic words, you're missing the boat as a leader. And it's just a key part of that sometimes people don't think. And that's a key part when you're talking about uh, organizational maneuverability in a rapidly changing, unpredictable environment and everything. And so it's key for that. As a leader, do you do that well? And to what extent do you have to improve and do it better?
I think this is something that you also mention in your book. I remember that you write about true leadership flows from what is actually going on inside us. What
Hmm.
internal work must happen before good leadership shows up?
Well, keep in mind, and I'll just give a couple of examples with it. But if you think about it, if you have somebody who, in their nonverbal communication, you can almost sense that there's a degree, or in the way that they communicate, the way they talk, the way it's coming out, what's the look in their eyes, or whatever. Are you aware of the fear and the real um, you know, desire to be wanting to kind of hold back because of this situation that is in them? And here's the thing, if all you're doing is telling them to go do this, you're not getting a job done. If you are interacting with them in such a way, again, connecting within them in such a way that they can overcome what is freeing them up and holding them back and making them fear, and they can enhance the courage a little bit to step forward and watch for what happens, kind of thing. That's a key aspect of leadership that many people don't really think about quite as much.
Interesting. Randy, you know, also related to this, I remember that you reference neuroscience a lot and you speak about the internal work inside
Yeah.
us in your book and your articles. Which leadership behaviors would you say align most clearly with what neuroscience tells us? I remember you mentioned a dopamine fix. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, I'll be glad to do that. As you know, there's a number of chemicals within your brain as to what your brain uses to create the physical aspects and feelings in your body and everything. And what you have to realize, norepinephrine is one where somebody feels like they've got to either walk away from this thing or fight it. Norepinephrine will come in and happen. Okay. But the other part of it is, and this is a critical one, I think, for the question that you asked. The other one is referred to as the dopamine fix. And the dopamine is the chemical that the brain releases to make us feel rewarded, to make us feel patted on the back and stuff like that. And if all you are doing as a leader, or if you see some of your team members where all they are doing is focusing on the dopamine fix to just do anything that can kind of help them feel dopamine kind of thing, you're missing the boat. You're not really leading well, and you're not really bringing the radical success possibilities into it. And so it's just a matter of what you're uh, going to be able to accomplish and things like that. Um, and it sounds kind of crazy, but sometimes a dopamine fix can happen when you set it aside. Because you know what? The reaction that happens when you brought the whole attention off just yourself, kind of thing, to the situation, sometimes that can make the dopamine fix come in because guess what? Your success aspect about it was bigger than you thought, possibly. Not guaranteed, but possibly. And so the bottom line is from the neuroscience aspect of it, you got to be aware of, as a leader, you got to be aware of the chemicals. And of course, oxytocin, dopamine, cortisol, norepinephrine, and all of that, serotonin, and all that, they all have different things that they create in the body and the feeling and everything. But they all are generated by the brain. And, um, and you got to be aware of that. And you got to be aware of what you're experiencing with your people. What are they kind of showing you? And because guess what? If they're being completely focused on the dopamine fix, guess what? You may have to come in and help them get a sense of how you need to sometimes set that aside a little bit to move forward and to be successful, possibly. Or some of the other chemicals, just being aware of it. All of that is a key factor of it. But it's uh, these are chemicals that the brain uses to generate the feelings and the all that in your body. And um, if norepinephrine kicks in and somebody feels like they're going to fight somebody when that's not what you should be doing right now, you may need to step in with that and all that. So all of these, just being aware of those chemicals and how the brain works with that and how it does it and what you're aware of is a key aspect of leading your team and getting a sense of how they are allowing that to apply in their decision making, in their life, in their teamwork, in their team synergy, and all of that. And because guess what? Sometimes you need to step in and make sure that the team is really connected, um, and not fighting each other, not just focusing on themselves, possibly. And so there's a lot of aspects like that that can come into play.
So, Randy, let's say a leader realizes that they often default to this self-focused
Uh,
behavior. What is the first concrete change you would encourage them to make?
and you know what? One of the first things that I would encourage the leader is to become aware of how they may need to change that because it's possible, not guaranteed, but it's possible that your team is following what you're modeling. And you know what? If it's one thing to come up and just threaten your people, but it's another thing when you come up and say, you know what, folks, I got to get better at this too. As a team, let's all get better at this. You and I, let's work together. Let's get this better. And that is a key aspect that is a key part of leadership that sometimes people don't understand as much. But it's one of the things is making sure that they sense a real synergy in moving forward as a team together in getting better at this, but also asking some questions to understand how are you going to be aware of when this is getting back involved or not. How are you going to be aware if the oxytocin kicks in so that people really feel this thriving socially together and all that kind of stuff, all that. How are you going to be aware of that? And are they even aware of each of those chemicals and what they're focused on? And how do they do that? So a lot of times as a leader, it's asking them the questions that make them sort of think through it and look at that aspect of it and how they're going to do it. Because sometimes, and by the way, if you ask a question, don't ask it in such a way where they think, oh, I got to answer this question right now. Because guess what? They may not have it right this second. they may have it this evening as they're thinking about it. They may come to work tomorrow morning and come up to you and said, "Hey," because I've had a guy do this one time with me with when I shared with him, and he said he thanked me for what I did, and he said, "I got to just tell you, Randy, this is this was amazing. I I got a real insight with this, and I've applied it." And I said, "Good, buddy, good." And so that's just a key aspect of it that sometimes people don't often think about. But you know what? It's that aspect that you got to have when you're being a leader and not just a dictatorial manager.
Right, Randy. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us. There is so many examples that you bring in your book and your articles. I can really only encourage everyone to take a look and get inspired.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. We will see a lot more of you in the very near future on your YouTube channel and on all your social media. Thanks, Randy.
Oh, okay. So, well, I'll tell you what. I appreciate the the questions that you had, and I hope uh, that what I brought was beneficial to you and all that. And I appreciate you being here. As you know, you and Justin and I totally value you both as friends and as colleagues, and I appreciate whenever we get together.
Thank you so much, Randy.
Okay, take care.
Take care.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.